Good evening, everyone. Welcome to 12 Gauge Investigative Podcast. Get strapped in. Let's do this. Let's ride.
Good evening, everyone. My name is 12 Gauge, and welcome to my channel, 12 Gauge Investigative Podcast. You know, tonight I don't feel like being on camera, so I'm going to go ahead and keep myself hidden from the more important things that I want to go back and look at. Not because of any other reason than I was cleaning out some of my stuff in my email, my zip drives, all kinds of stuff, and I ran across some videos and stuff that I thought were quite interesting that you guys might enjoy. Hello there. Nice to see you. So let me go ahead and get this up here. Some of these interviews are going to be interviews that we've seen before, of course. It's nothing earth-shattering or something that's so earth-breaking that, But I think it's interesting to see some of this stuff because, especially this one. This one's an interview from one of Ethan's good friends. So let's watch this.
I came across a young man who was good friends with Ethan Chapin, and he told me what it's been like to face this tragic loss. Watch.
I knew Ethan and Xana.
What do you remember about them?
They were really good people. I always loved seeing them whenever they were around campus. Ethan was a good friend of mine, so it's pretty sad. But I came back because I still want to keep pursuing my dreams. But it's definitely a lot hard for people to come back, especially after that.
Yeah. Do you think it's brought the community, this university, closer together, or has it fractured the campus?
I mean, I would definitely say it fractured it, as not a lot of people are here.
Yeah.
But in a way, it's brought us together, especially just the Moscow community and Idaho in general.
How do you feel about them not catching the person that did this? Is that completely shocking to you right now? Or
I mean, given the little amount of evidence that they have and have found, it's not too surprising that they haven't found the suspect, but it's still just disappointing.
So like you said, given the little to no evidence that they had at that point, think about how we all felt early on, because this thing was way a long time ago, right? 2022 seems like 20 years ago at this point. But I thought this was pretty interesting.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here.
Let me see. And this individual is no longer with us. So he said Idaho murders was targeted, not that of a serial killer. Let's see what Mark had to say.
Mark Furman joins me now. He's a former LAPD detective and currently lives in Idaho. So, Detective, if you were running this on point, what would you be doing right now?
Well, Jesse, I would probably be doing exactly what they're doing right now. I am actually fairly impressed when I go back and actually see exactly how fast they put together a task force. And many times, smaller agencies are hesitant to be second guessed, so they don't bring in other agencies or the feds or the state police because they don't want to be, criticized or anything else. And that's not the fact here. So I'd like everybody to understand that almost every serial killer investigation that we know that's famous starts out in large agencies that don't get any handle on it until victim 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So
you see right there?
Do you think this is a serial killer on the loose?
It's
Rambo style knife used in the killings. And how many times have we heard lately that's not true? That's not true. PKC, how are you doing? Sue from South Africa, how are you? PKC, do you remember that narrative or, statement? I'm going to call it a statement. I'm not going to call it. I'm going to call it a statement where that was being spoken of really early on about a Rambo style knife being used in the killings. I remember that because I thought to myself, man, I remember Rambo's knife and it was huge. It was serrated on one end and it had a whole lot of capability of being very dangerous. So I thought that was wild that that's on that.
Detective?
I would say no. Just as the chief of police said in the press conference, and you stated in your monologue, we have a targeted crime here, and they're not going to lay out exactly why it's targeted. I think the chief of police was quite candid, dancing around the question a little bit. He gave an answer that they are looking at it as a targeted offense because of the.
So based on what a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about recently, because this is what kind of goes along with the very beginning. People talk about the PCA, they talk about different variations, but I like to talk about the logistics of it, not what was spoken to the public. I know right here we're going over these interviews, but to me, there's not much evidentiary stuff in them. You know what I mean? PKC said, yeah, I think one of the stores leaked that out. They were questioned of possibly selling one. Yeah, I remember that. So Mr. Furman continues on.
Totality of the circumstance, well, of course, that would cover anything and everything. So they are looking at this as a targeted offense, and a targeted offense means that the suspect knows and sought out one or more victims in that house specifically.
So do you believe that this dog that was filleted like a fish is connected to this quadruple homicide?
I think that we could pass over that and put that in the file to get to sometime. But they need to stay on point, and I think they've stayed on point fairly well on this. Now they've turned to the public. Blood spatter analysis, you brought it up. The FBI's experts are there. Now, blood spatter analysis can tell us a lot of things. The progression of the wounds, which victim was first, second, third, and fourth, can tell us if the suspect is right or left-handed, and if the attack occurred when both people are standing. Sometimes.
Hey, that's something that's always been debated as well. As the spatter, how much blood was there? How much blood wasn't there? Which direction did it go? How were you able to decipher whether the blood came from this victim or that victim? Was there any blood mixture in any of the eventual areas that later we were shown? We've talked about all that. We talked about that multitudes of times. And one thing that I was saying yesterday while I was riding around is people can say anything, and they do. But that doesn't necessarily mean that what they're talking about has much substance. Just because you have an ideology that says, well, it must have not been that violent of a crime because there wasn't a lot of blood. Or possibly there would have been a whole lot of blood had this really have occurred and that occurred. Well, a lot of these individuals that are speaking on this are speaking out of speculation. They're not speaking out of the ability to be forensic experts in blood spatter analysis. Unless they have that type of expertise, they're just speculating. They're just talking to sound intelligent. They're just talking to feel their chats with inquisitive mind, because think about this a little bit. And I know that you're going to understand this and agree with this, PKC. If you are an individual that is out to kill somebody, not necessarily in this case, because, this case has been talked about, dragged through the mud, all this, whatever. You're out to kill somebody, and you're using a Rambo type knife, as they said very early on. Hey, Walt, so you're going in to kill these people. And I've said this before in other lives, okay? I've said this before. If you're going in to kill somebody, you're going in to try to get away with the crime, not to implicate yourself by leaving so much evidence that it points right back to you. Because think about this a little bit. If the knife sheath wouldn't have been left behind, I want to go this direction, okay? If that knife sheath wouldn't have been left behind, would they have caught him in the amount of time that they did? Would they have had more other than that camera footage showing that questionable car going around the neighborhood? You get what I'm saying? It's like, would they have caught him that quickly? I don't believe so. And if you're going along that line with that thinking that without that knife sheath, they wouldn't have caught him as like they did, what would it have taken to get the inside of that house attached to him? You know what I mean? Yeah, I agree with you. Well, I'm just looking back at things that, that really made you go,
The height, we've got shoe prints that are no doubt either there, whether they were obliterated by the suspect during the battle, the fight, the murder, or it was people that came in after the fact.
All right, so let me ask you this as a former detective. You could possibly find the height, and you could possibly determine right or left-handed, and you may get a footprint. So maybe you got a type of shoe, size of shoe. Does that narrow this thing down enough to give you a clue about who you're chasing?
Well, the first thing is they're not going to tell us what they come up with in any of that. Like the average shoe size for a man is 10 and a half. So you can separate things into categories, and if they're lucky enough, they'll be able to find some forensic evidence, even if they can reduce that just to blood typing, even though the DNA is not in the system. So they are collecting information that might point them towards a suspect or be actually useful when they actually have a suspect or a person of interest for an interrogation. And these are all small items. And another one that I'm really hopeful for is if the suspect cut himself in these attacks, because a couple of the victims supposedly had some defensive wounds, and in knife attacks that would most often.
So that's an interesting take right there. We have never heard anywhere where it's been relayed to us that the perpetrator cut himself, other than the pictures where he's given a thumbs up. Later on, we see his knuckles, and we see some areas of, discoloration. I believe that if you're punching someone in the face with whatever it is that you're utilizing to hit them with, that it's going to leave some abrasions on your knuckles. And it possibly, even if you're wearing gloves, unless those gloves are having some kind of almost like brass knuckles type inserts, it's still going to leave some kind of bruising or abrasions on your knuckles to the point where it could potentially cut them. But we haven't been told one way or the other if he had any of these things on him, other than by family members that have stated, that they feel that he used a second weapon. So a lot of this was very insightful early on because it led people to not want to trust these types of shows, but yet they were running with this stuff nonstop.
Often be a cut to the hands or the forearms because they're putting their hands up to stop the blow of the knife. Yeah. If the suspect cut himself controlling the victim with his weak hand, there's a chance he might have struck himself. So they're working on all these things that, in most cities, you'll never hear about in the news. And in big cities, this happens.
I mean,
all
but
the
this
time.
is a small town and we get it. But I mean, the whole country's following this because it's 4 victims. It's a knife attack. It's in a small town. Everyone is scared at that school. Everyone's terrified of the Pacific Northwest that there's a serious.
Let me ask you this question, and anybody who watches this in the future, you can type in the comments. But let me ask you this question. We know it was a knife attack of some sort, fixed blade, right? That's what they've said. No matter how much we try to analyze videos and everything else, it's in the documents. Had there not been a knife attack, had there been just a shooting, had an individual walked in there, had Brian walked in there with a gun, shot all 4 of them, and then walked out, of course, he would have made such a sound with the gun that it would have alerted the other 2, right? And possibly people in the neighborhood. But at the same time, would you believe that a gun, if it was used in that way, would have been the weapon if they told you it was the weapon? Without having to see the ballistics, without having to see the injuries on the bodies, would you believe whenever somebody tells you, hey, that was a 9mm, hollow point, blah, blah, blah? Would you believe that? Or would you still have that mentality that there's no way that could have been that because of this or that and the other? So I ask you that not to be contrite, but to just give you an understanding of the variations of discrepancy that people have regarding this case. Always wonder, would they have a difference of opinion had it been 4 males that have been killed? 4 males killed in the dead of the night. Would they still believe? Would people still believe? I don't want to say they, because there's a lot of people that believe this. Would people still believe that the perpetrator would have been culpable of being able to do such a thing? The fact that it was 3 women and 1 male, most people can't decipher the fact that actually could happen. Granted, all 3 of those women were 5'1", 5'2", 5'3", in that freaking range of height. So if you've ever seen somebody that stature, you have an understanding that it's not going to take as much to derail them or overtake them as it would somebody that could be 5'11" or more. Unless you caught them off guard.
Serial killer with a knife on the loose. So I hope they wrap this up quick because there's a lot of woods area and this guy could be anywhere, or guys. And I think they're doing a good job so far, but they got to catch a break. Detective, I got to run. Thank you so much.
Okay. You bet.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here.
Students at the University of Idaho returning to campus this week with a great sense of relief after Brian Kohberger is charged with the murder of 4 students. DNA evidence playing a major part in the case. Watch.
They have additional DNA that I've been told by a source, and that DNA is being processed. 2 of the victims allegedly fought back. They may very well have DNA under the fingernails of those victims that fought back. So they have a very, very strong case.
A knife sheath was left behind at the crime scene, which our next guest says could help indicate who exactly the killer was targeting. Forensics expert, distinguished scholar of applied forensics, Jacksonville State University.
So think about that. Think about what they just said, okay? And a lot of people don't like mainstream media. I get it. I get it. You don't like anything that has to do with, discussing something that could or could possibly not be true. But at the same time, we have individuals that get on YouTube and do the same damn thing. And where did they get their information to dispel the facts or debunk them? You heard it. Mainstream media. So to be able to just sit here and say, well, there's no way that this could have happened. There's no way that could have happened. Hold on a second. I'm going to go shut this dog up. So let me play this video while I'm doing this.
Joseph Scott Morgan joins us now. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us. Give me your top line thoughts of why it indicates who the killer might have been targeting.
Good morning, Emily. Yeah, we have to think about these 2 victims, these 2 female victims were actually co-sleeping. They were, according to the affidavit, they were actually found in the same bed. And this sheath, which we've been talking about for some time, certainly we've been talking about the knife, the sheath was actually found immediately adjacent to one of the remains there. And the recovery of the DNA from this sheath actually originates from what's referred to as the button snap. This is the location on the sheath that holds the knife in place. If you're wearing it on your hip, for instance, it keeps it from falling out.
The multitude of individuals. See, this is why talking on this case really doesn't intrigue me anymore, but I still got to talk about it because it seems to be a hot topic. You know what I mean? How did Brian carry that knife into the residence if it wasn't attached to his body? How could he have carried it in there? Did he have the sheath in one hand, the knife in the other? You know as well as I do, he didn't carry it in like that. Anybody in the chat? Did I run you all off? I know this is not really a popular topic anymore, and you don't really like to hear about it, but like I said, I was cleaning this stuff out, and I was watching this. I was thinking to myself, this might be an interesting live. For no other reason than just to present some of the stuff that really was being talked about early on in the case, rather than all the made up, dramatized untruth that people have coming out of their mouths on a daily. I swear, I'm getting to the point where I don't even like being on TikTok, YouTube as well. I mean, because it's like one right after the other. And they're talking as if this crime happened yesterday. All this is 4 years ago. Let's listen to what he has to say, because this dude is a really bright individual.
Snap. This is the location on the sheath that holds the knife in place. If you're wearing it on your hip, for instance, it keeps it from falling out. But in order to release the knife from the sheath, that button snap has to be flipped at that moment in time. So if you think about the dynamics of this event, if the intruder, if the accused enters into the bedroom and begins to attack these two victims simultaneously, he would have essentially, I hate to say this, would have actually pounced on them in the bed perhaps, because they're both together. He would have unsheathed the knife and then begun to do his work at that point in time.
And people say, well, how did it end up under Maddie? How did it end up there? Well, just like we all believe, nobody knows unless you were there, which was, the only people that were there were the deceased and the two living victims. But think about this, as we've seen in photograph or reenactments, people don't like those either. On one of them, she said that it looked like he knelt down in between the victim's legs, as one leg was dangling over the edge of the bed. Well, think about this. If you're going to hold the sheath down, aren't you going to put it on the bed and put your knee on it to remember, hey, I need to take this with me? But I don't think he anticipated as much fight as he had to overcome in that bed. I don't think he anticipated having to fight Kaylee in the variation that he had to fight her. I don't believe that he had any idea that it was going to be as difficult as it was, because people make this crime as if, Brian did it and he did it quickly and there was no struggle. Well, I don't believe that at all. I believe that those victims gave him a hell of a fight, especially Kaylee and Dana. Obviously, Ethan and Maddie were not able to fight for whatever reason. It doesn't necessarily mean what kind of wounds they had pertain to their ability of being able to fight him off or not. I don't really think that, and I hate saying that word, because when you say this is what I think, or this is what I feel, or this is what I believe, that is just your opinion. That is not factual. But when it comes to this, there's only so much that you can say that really makes sense to anybody other than your own minds.
And I think probably dropping the sheath right there.
Essentially, what you're arguing here is that he unsheathed the knife at the primary point where he started to execute these four kids, which means the primary target is the first place he did it. What is the probability of transfer DNA, which is being thrown around by many people who probably don't have anywhere near your qualifications?
Well, it is very real. There's an old principle in forensics called Lacard's principle of exchange. Every contact leaves a trace. That's over 100 years old. It applies here. So if you think about the perpetrator, just absolutely devastating these individuals, these poor victims, blood will transfer to him. Now, anything that comes off of him, conversely, transfers to their bodies as well. And it's not just blood. We're talking about any kind of touch DNA, like dead.
So we didn't hear about any of this stuff. So therefore, because we didn't hear about it, it must not be something that happened. That is people's logic. If they didn't talk about it, it didn't happen. If we didn't read about it in the documents, it didn't happen. I get that. I get that wholeheartedly. But you really think that none of his stuff transferred to any of the victims? None whatsoever. That all it was that knife sheath and that little button snap that convicted this individual. If that's the narrative you're willing to stick with, then, I applaud you. But if you're one of those that believes this man is innocent, but you have no scientific data on how to not necessarily debunk, but how to decipher how things occurred if it wasn't him. We never hear this couldn't have been Brian because of this. Scientifically, we hear it couldn't have been Brian because he was fragile and autistic and he could barely walk and he was frail and this and that. But look at him right there in that photo that is being showed on the screen. Does he look frail to you? Richard Allen looked frail to me. That is my definition of frail. And that photo right there that I captured at the right spot of that video, that man doesn't look frail. Him walking from the airplane, he didn't walk as if he was about to fall down and could barely lift his legs. You know what I mean? He was very capable of walking when we saw him at Costco. Did he look like he was so frail he walked in on a walker? He walked in with a cane because of his inability to keep his balance. He was so autistic that he could not teach a class or grade a class or even be given a TA job because his autism was so bad. Yeah, or the DMV. Thank you for that. That's exactly true. Yes, he does, PKC. He really does. You know, it's like you have your own issues and you project your own issues onto this case because we have multitudes of individuals, one of them deceased now, but I never understood his stance for being anti-police. His son was murdered, supposedly. I'm going to say allegedly because he never brought any proof to it. So, allegedly, his son was murdered. And the whole time, this man was claiming that Maddie flushed a substantial amount of drugs down the toilet. And he was caught saying this. And they even asked, were you lying? Yeah, I made this up. Ha, 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 ha. And he was laughing about it. But this was a creator that had multitudes of followers because either they felt sorry for him because of his health, or they felt sorry for him because he just seemed to plead to the masses like many of the male creators on here, on these YouTube streets, that try to give a sob story. I was in the hospital last week. This, that, and the other. I need a blood transfusion. I have leukemia. I have cancer. I have this. I have that. But not one time do they present any factual information that you can see. You don't see the hospital admission forms that they could show the masses, right? You don't see anything but these made up. And I'm going to say made up because you know what? If you can get on this YouTube and you can go after people the way you do, how are we supposed to just sit there and believe that anything that you write or any photo that you show the masses is legit? It works both ways. But you go against the narrative that people actually grift for their health reasons, it pisses people off. It pisses people off. How dare you? That person's sick. That person's this. That person's that. Well, this person's sick. This person is not frail. You're telling me that an autistic, frail boxer an individual that wanted to be a police officer, that was given a TA job, ran 6 miles a day, was so frail, so uncoordinated that he was unable to do that. I didn't see any uncoordinatedness. He seemed to walk just fine in that Costco yard, right? In the Albertsons photo or in the video, he walked just perfectly fine all the way around the store. Wasn't lost. Didn't seem out of sorts, like he didn't understand where he was or, you know. But at the same time, they want you to think, well, he was high functioning. But he was frail. He was a frail boy. He wasn't frail. He wasn't frail. Let's hear what this individual, Joseph Scott Morgan, had to say.
Skin cells that are sloughing off. You also have hair transfer, fiber transfer. All of these things are going through. And here's key. If he has blood on him, he's going to contact the surfaces that he's walking on and touching. Powerful evidence.
Joseph Scott Morgan, thank you so much for your expertise. We will absolutely stay with you for developments in this case as they arrive.
Well, let me quit sharing because I don't want you to see some of the other stuff that I have on my email. That I did come across though, and I thought were very interesting. I'm going to show you a very frail person, right? Look, I'm going to show you a frail person. Y'all tell me if y'all see a frail person right there. Because this is what people do. You see this photo? You see this photo? There's no way he could have done it because he's right-handed. And most of those knife wounds came from a left-handed knife. You get what I'm saying? They came from a left-handed knife. Okay, well, where's your proof of that? Where did you get that? Well, it was said, I just remember somebody way back when was talking about it being a left-handed knife. I don't really recall who it was, but I remember way back when somebody said it. And I agree with that. I agree with that with everything I am. A left-handed knife. What do y'all think, chat? You think there's no way he could have done it because it was a left-handed knife. You think that he was not culpable because it was a left-handed knife. Give me your thoughts. And the word is not probable, it's culpable. There's a difference in the wording. So, let me see what this guy has to say because I don't even know who they're talking about. That same non-electric recipient said that Xana only would have fought a female, not a male, allegedly. Huh. How do people know that, though? But that same autism didn't prevent him from buying the knife and then leaving the sheath at the scene. Well, very true. Very true. But this is a very autistic. Oh, my God. That pisses people off when they hear that word. Autism, autistic, spectrum, all that stuff. It pisses them off. Why? Because they view this individual as a handicapped person, which obviously he wasn't handicapped. He was culpable of these murders as admittance out of his own mouth. He was able to teach undergrads things like that. Criminal justice stuff, right? I wanted to show you that because I think this photo right here says a lot. It really does. The man standing straight up, he's not slumped over like Frodo. Okay? Not slumped over like Frodo. And here's some of the stuff that I thought was interesting at the time, so I took, screenshots of it. It says there was body camera footage that the cops released from the night of the murders. The footage was taken at almost the same time as the slayings occurred. In the distance, a white car near the house was noticed. The cops were, at that time, harassing some kids for booze and writing $500 tickets. Someone on the internet, not the cops, said, "Hey, what's the deal with this white car?" Then later, a chick at a gas station nearby had a video of it speeding away. Whoa. That is some earth-shattering evidence right there. That is not evidence, bro. How's that evidence? Did it give you something that we already don't know? How could you connect anything that was said here to the crime or vice versa? How can you fight against anything that was said in that statement to make the cops wrong and it not be him? Circumstantially, there's some stuff in here that could go towards the probability of making this man culpable. See, this is when we had to say alleged. The alleged killer, Brian Kohberger, was found because his phone was hooked to Bluetooth on the white Elantra at the Highway 6 gas station. His phone just happened to be on 4chan at the time because he was posting horrible details about the crime on the thread about the murders. He connected through public Wi-Fi. Your phone will always search for connections if your Wi-Fi feature is turned on. A cell phone constantly connects to whatever Wi-Fi and cell tower networks it's near. It does this to constantly know its location. So whenever you need a cell tower, you have one. And whenever you want to use Google Maps or whatever, it doesn't take 5 minutes for the phone to get jacked into the correct GPS network. Google and Apple also use this to build profiles on where your phone goes for completely benign reasons. This means they found the poster after he kept jumping VPNs while posting on the 4chan Idaho slasher thread. I don't remember that being talked about a lot, but these are just some things that I saw. Oh, this is verifiable, right? This is where the evidence comes in. We can take this to the bank, my friend. I remember reading this and I thought to myself, I don't remember any ceiling fans in that 1122 house. And unless this individual was trying to be very discreet, which he wasn't, how did he know to be in, Pennsylvania in some shithole? Yeah, I do remember that. Remember when people were trying to say this was blood on this individual, even though this picture was uploaded on the 19th, not the 22nd? And people are going crazy. This is the killer. This is Jack S. or Jack D. No evidence, nothing more than just people's imaginations running wild. Because he's wearing a ski mask. So people can make that the killer, but they can't see the fact that Brian Kohberger could have wore a balaclava. There's no way. No way. They thought this was blood. Here's the killer right here. Remember these photos? I remember hearing countless people talking about this. They would say, they're definitely in the red Jeep because this looks like the red Jeep interior because the bars are red and there's white up here. So this is the roof of the red Jeep. And this must be Bethany or Dylan, and this is her boyfriend. Crap. Just crap. How do you get any of that from that photo? How do you believe that that is investigative skills? Because one, you have a confirmation bias. One, you don't like any of the surviving roommates, so therefore you're going to implicate them every chance you get. So every woman that you see is potentially Dylan or Bethany. Every man associated with these women is either their boyfriend or somebody in the frat. So that kind of makes your perspective even more believable when you're presenting it to other people, right? I remember that photo. People were going crazy over that. And this is where supposedly the cameras was. I think I got duped on that one, but very well could have been. And then this is the lady that was looking for gun shell residue or evidence that the dog could alert her of. I mean, somebody was making fun of this because they said this in one of the documentaries or something. Somebody was talking about this woman and this dog. What could she have possibly been doing with that dog? And they were just making fun of it, just like people always do. She's alleged to have heard or saw things which could clear the suspect, as Mr. Batoni argued will be crucial witness. Mr. Kohberger's lawyer claimed Ms. Funk has exculpatory information that is material and necessary to the alleged killer's defense. It said defense. It doesn't say innocence. It says defense. So once again, confirmation bias makes you mix up words. Where you see things that really aren't there, you read things that really aren't read the way that you're talking about them. And it makes you try to convince your audience that you know what the hell you're talking about. Because exculpatory evidence, as we've talked about, it's the difference between inculpatory, which is something that goes against the defendant, evidence that is shown against the defendant. Exculpatory could be something that could be vindicative to the perpetrator, but we didn't hear anything about in any of the documents about this exculpatory evidence. Let's go with the next one. Investigator Richard Batonti, who is working for Ann Taylor. Mr. Kohberger's lawyer has subpoenaed Ms. Funk to appear at the accused killer's hearing on June 28th. According to the affidavit, she allegedly witnessed a naked man run through a rear sliding door. She lived on the first floor of the home and came face to face with the alleged killer. Now, based on what we know, at any point did we see anything that would have been true on that statement? I'm going to show you a picture of Brian's college door where he lived at his apartment. Okay. There it is, 201. Nothing fancy, just very ordinary, right? Imagine living in that apartment. If they may have changed the number, they may have painted it, may have taken the carpet out, put tile in there. But imagine knowing that this used to be 201, and this is where Brian spent most of his time collaborating this crime that he was about to commit. Because one thing for certain, as long as there's something that feeds someone's narrative, I'm going to show you something here. And I've showed it before. I'm not monetized, so let's watch it, right? This is a knife attack on something that presents itself to be an immovable object. This is how people visualize this knife attack. They visualize that the knife attack would just have been, non-bloody. Here we go. So this tells you this is a machete, obviously. This man is standing up, and look at the force he has to expel to do this kind of damage. Okay? He decapitated this thing. So for a machete to have been used, the individual would have been swinging like a baseball player all over the place. And look at the blood spatter. See how hard it is for him to get that knife out? He's just not stabbing and pulling it out. Okay? He is having to work to bring that knife out, and he's stabbing deep. And there's another person with a machete. So all those people that believe that this happened with a machete, you're full of shit. This did not happen with a machete. Because if you remember, in the PCA and many of the documents that we've read about this incident, there were deep gashes and tears. The first man in the first one was using the machete, right? That machete would have caused so much damage, he wouldn't have needed to beat her face up. Yeah. This is the one that I want to show you. This is a dude with a fixed blade knife. Here we go. This doll, or whatever you want to call it, had the capability to have blood in it, right? You saw that man slashing and gashing and everything else. Was there any blood spraying on him? Was there any blood going all over the wall? Do you see any blood everywhere? So this kind of tells you fantasy versus reality. I mean, I know this is a dummy, but think about this being a person. What could have been an axe? Yeah, that's what it was. A double-edged axe. No, it wasn't. Look at that knife. That is like a sword, my man. No way it could have been any of that stuff. No way. But many people want you to believe this stuff. Could it have been a hammer tied to a baseball bat? Maybe that's what it was. Is that what it was? Y'all tell me. Was it a hammer tied to a baseball bat? That's what it was. We solved the crime tonight on 12 Gauge Investigative Podcast. It was not a K-bar knife. It was a baseball bat duct taped to axe handle. And on the end of the axe handle, what was it? An axe. I'm going to show these right here because I thought these were interesting to say the least. I received these. It says, I don't know what that cease and desist letter was from. What is this? Let's see. It says, my sister's best friend from college is married. I remember this. To an FBI agent. He was one of the first FBI agents allowed at the scene in Moscow. Apparently, the murderer's knife sheath was found under the body of Ethan. They were able to find DNA on the sheath and send it to 23andMe. A cousin of the killer had done 23andMe, so they were able to somehow link the killer. That and a cat happened to be taking a pee and set off a nearby Ring camera, which is where they were able to see the white Hyundai Elantra, which of course the killer drove. They tracked him to PA, where he was home on winter break with family. An agent posed as garbage man and went through the family's garbage to find DNA and confirm DNA match. From the text message my sister received from FBI agent, apparently it is one of the most gruesome crime scenes he's ever been a part of. Ethan's legs were sliced all the way down to the hamstrings. One of the girls was stabbed 54 times and beaten so badly every bone in her face was broken. And so sunken in, she was unrecognizable. So how much of that is real? You get what I'm saying? There was a lot of people. The Elantra was white. And of course, there's real investigators right there, real forensic people that have a real uninvolvement in solving the case. Here we go. It says, on November 13th, the surviving roommate summoned friends to the residence because they believe one of the second-floor victims had passed out and was not waking up. At 11:58 a.m., a 911 call requested aid for an unconscious person. The call was made for one of the surviving roommates' cell phones inside the residence. Multiple people talked with the 911 dispatcher before Moscow police arrived at the location. So we heard about this, and this later deemed to be true. Yeah, the cat taking a pee. I heard that in the very beginning. I thought, oh my God, that's wild that a cat solved the murder. They said it was green. Well, there you go. There you go. It's green Elantra. That's what it was. Okay. 2 people who claimed to be at the house with the roommates when the bodies were discovered quickly came to the surviving roommate's defense and wrote that the roommates woke up, went upstairs to the kitchen, and noticed the sliding glass door was open. And it was during that time they discovered Ethan. They didn't say where he was found on the floor, but it was so horrific that both girls went into shock and ran out of the house. One of the roommates fainted, and the other was beyond hysterical and not making any sense. Their frantic actions while coming out of the house caught the attention of people walking past. The people responding on the victim's IG claimed to be 2 of those people. They implied that the roommate who fainted had already dialed 911, but was so distraught that she fainted before she could give any info that the dispatcher could understand. The only info that the bystander who picked up the roommate's phone could give the 911 dispatcher was that she just saw her friend run out of the house and faint. That's how the 911 call was made on the roommate's phone and by someone else, and why the call went out for an unconscious person. I don't remember where I got that from, but think about that a little bit. This is what we as us that are in this live, this is what we heard very early on. I don't know what you thought about when you hear unconscious person. I don't know what goes through your mind. But see, I visualized it just like this. And when we saw the body cam and none of this happened, I was confused. I ain't gonna lie. Because this was a story that was going around at the very beginning. I thought that the unconscious person was one of the people that ran out of that residence. And that is who they were calling about. Thank you for that, PKC. I will, if I have your permission, I'll show that. We'll definitely show that. But what did you think whenever you heard very early on about the unconscious person? I don't know who you are talking about not paying their electric bill, but that is obviously that person doesn't value electricity. I mean, electricity is a must, especially in this heat. But think about that I just read. That seems to be somebody's perspective. Does this mean that this is how it happened? Because we're going to believe this, but we're not going to believe what the police brought up and investigated, because we believe that this is true in investigations, and everything that was spoken on is not true. And here, these were early on. It says, back to the original rumor out of Moscow, now with the new context on 911 call and insight on use of drugs being rumored. It says, final edit. In reference to a roommate hallucinating, she did not actually hallucinate. She thought she hallucinated, or her mind was playing tricks on her in the dark. So everyone commenting that you don't actually hallucinate, real people while tripping. I know it's speculated she actually saw him, but at first thought he was not real. May have taken drugs earlier in the night and chalked up what she saw as not actual event, just being tired. This is Moscow, Idaho. Taking drugs or not, the first thought of a intruder in your home is not what would come to mind. All of this dance was on speculation, not actual hallucinations from taking drugs. Just the thought she might be hallucinating to make sense of seeing someone at 3 a.m. See, stuff like this is what feeds those other channels. They jump on that. 3 a.m. See, the timeline was fucked up. She lied. Dylan's a liar, blah, blah, blah. All this. Marking us as info because it's speculation around town. Still a theory at best, not confirmed. See, this not confirmed. It's just people piecing all these things together, trying to make it make sense. One of the very first rumors I was told in town was that the two surviving roommates heard something, went into the room, and locked the door until morning before calling friends over and then the police. This rumor started so much speculation and head scratching in the beginning, like if they heard something, why wouldn't they call 911? And that's something that I have to ask you. How do you believe that would be the first thought to go through these people's minds? You saw how hardcore that 911 operator was when they did finally call 911. Let me retrace a little bit, and then I'm going to show you some other stuff that I just received. But let me retrace your mind a little bit. When the cops show up multiple times for noise complaints and they threaten you to give you citations and all this other stuff, the last thing you want is police to be at your fucking residence. How hard is that to understand? We call the cops and it's for nothing, and we're drunk or we have something going on here. We don't want anybody to see, hey, we're underage. You don't call the police when you're young. I don't care who wants to debate that with me. You don't. You don't. I did hear a similar version of this in the first days after the murder regarding what one of the surviving roommates saw. He was not at the top of the stairs, but outside her window. She thought she was seeing things, maybe hallucinating, for lack of a better word, and went into the other roommate's room across the hall. The rummaging she heard later was what she thought was just her roommates having people over late. Small party, get together after being out. There was a neighbor outside on the scene as emergency personnel were arriving that heard this roommate saying these things. I saw several pics early on of forensics taking pics of this window and dusting for prints. Maybe the killer was looking for entry into the home at that point. How could that not make sense? You know what I mean? How was he able to know that the slider was open unless he tried it, right? And that makes more sense. Someone outside in the dark sounds like something you actually could convince yourself you didn't really see, especially if they were gone, if you checked again or went and got your roommate to check. Their level of intoxication likely played a role. Drunk people at 3 a.m., once again, will fall asleep with their face in a plate of food with the TV on. And you know why these things are saying 3 a.m.? Because at the very beginning, we were told this happened between 2 and 4. Y'all remember that in chat? Give me an amen if you remember. Because there's a lot of people that seem to want to hang on to that, as if they were the one that created the timeline. Give me an amen in the chat if you remember that. The original timeline was 2 and 4. 2 to 4. This is the seatbelt violation. It says on August 21st, 2022, BK was issued a ticket for seatbelt violation. But I have that ticket. BK reportedly lived at the Steptoe Village, a WSU-operated housing complex for postgrads and students with families. The ticket also indicates that BK lived at the Steptoe Village apartments. Well, we all know where those apartments are. The ticket indicates that it was issued at the intersection of Pullman and Farm Road. That happened to be the intersection that someone traveling from Pullman to the crime scene would have to turn at in order to get to the King Road house. The Carfax, which was posted along with the ticket, indicate that BK put over 10,000 miles on his car in 4 months. You don't hear about that, though. You don't ever hear about that, right? Don't ever hear about that. Even if 2,500 of those miles were attributed to his drive from PA to Washington when he moved for school, he was still racking up these close to 400 miles a week. Doing what? He wasn't an Uber or food delivery driver, and he was in grad school and presumably studying for most of that time. BK's Pullman residence is 9.8 miles from the murder house. Theory. Very soon, within weeks after arriving in Pullman, BK was obsessively going by, casing the King Road house, which means he would have encountered his targets at that time frame. Additionally, cops don't usually go out of their way to give people seatbelt violations. In my experience, a seatbelt or similar violation is the result of a cop wanting to punish you for being suspect or doing something shady. Example, driving around a known drug area, etc., but lacking anything else to charge you with. I recorded many such violations in my misspent youth. I don't live in Idaho. I don't live in that state. I've never driven in that state. You know, the seatbelt law in Idaho is secondary law, not a primary law. This means that someone can't be pulled over only for not wearing a seatbelt. There has to be some other violation that causes the police to pull them over. And then they can hit them with a seatbelt violation as well. So yeah, it's usually used when someone did something minor and the cop decides to give them a break and hit them with a lesser charge of a seatbelt violation. Though, if a cop does want to pull someone over just for the seatbelt violation, they can probably find something to pull the person over for anyway. 1 mile over the speed limit, failing to come to a full and complete stop. Your boy knows about that. Not pulling a blinker on with enough warning. So, I don't know what y'all thought about that seatbelt ticket. Nobody's really talked about the mileage that he supposedly put on his little white Elantra with the bug guard. Wasn't that such a masculine addition to that Elantra? Let's put a bug guard on Elantra. What do y'all think about that? And this was, let me show some other photos that I just received. These are, I don't want to talk about the pings and shit. Let's see some of the pictures that I just received. And thank you so much for this, PKC. It's the first time that I've seen these. So this is Floyd's Cannabis Shop. And there you have it. There's 1, 2, 3 cameras right there in a row. No telling if those cameras were installed in 2022, but that is 5952, whatever road that is. Is it Highway 95? Is that what that is? 95? Like heading toward Pullman? Yeah, this is good old Floyd's. And there's another view. Thank you for these. Oh, there's another camera. And there's another camera. Look at all these freaking cameras on this place. 1, 2. There was one there. 3, 4, 5, 6 cameras all in one little. Tell me you were getting something from Floyd's, and I'll tell you, okay, cool. We've never seen a daytime shot of Floyd's. Were you getting you a little bit of medicine? You don't have to answer that. A little bit of pick me up or bring me down. This gentleman right here, is he wearing a clown mask? It looks like he's wearing a clown mask. You see that? Wow. Wow. That is crazy. 127. All right. Let's go to the next one. And here it is again. Like I told you earlier, there's a camera, there's a camera, there's a camera. There's a camera in the front. There's 3 in the front, 3 on the side. And this is guarded heavier than the National Vault. Shit. These are awesome photos, by the way. Let me back up and get out to the other ones. Thank you for this. Yeah, it looks like there's a lot of cameras all over the place. Oh my goodness. You're awesome, PKC. You really are. I think this is right. Or is this the espresso rider leaving town? Is this Cup of Joe? It is, isn't it? Let me know if I'm right. I think this is the Cup of Joe, right? So this would be in Lewiston, right? Okay, that's Kate's Cup of Joe. So what we saw him, or that white Elantra drive through the drive-through. There's another shot. There's a wide angle because we saw that camera drive through, catch him on this Cup of Joe. Looky. There's a light. Wouldn't that be some shit if there was some cameras around? Oh, looky right there. There's a camera right there. I've gotten so good at finding cameras. I used to not even give a shit, but now I'm just like looking all over the place for them. So there's a camera right there. So if this camera was in place in 2022 and he drove through here, as we've seen in other people's recreations of that, yeah, we're having a storm coming through here. So if that's what's going on. So if this camera was in place, it would have caught the back license plate. I'm always having technical difficulties. There's another camera. And there is, wow. That is some good stuff right there. Very good stuff. Thank you for that. Very good stuff right there. Always like stuff like that. Because, you know, these are the real heroes right here. These are the real heroes. If Dylan was 5'10", then maybe they weren't that much. They weren't that short. So maybe they were about 5'4", 5'5", something like that, 5'3". But those are the real heroes right there. But supposedly, any picture that this person took with them, there was animosity in her face. She didn't like any of them. Bethany was the silent partner, but yet they're sitting there holding hands, and she has an adoring look on her face. I just love how, we can just look at a photo and make so much out of a photo that we have no idea what was being said, done. They were smiling. She had her eyes closed. Could this have been a bad photo? One of the bad 10 photos that they took. You know what I mean? But people always want to paint a negative picture when it comes to one person or two people. It's sad and desperate, honestly. It really is. If you don't have anything better to do with your life than to degrade at that time a 19-year-old kid that lived through a horrific crime, because once again, there's another creator that talks shit about Dylan all the time, right? But if you dig into this person's past, you're going to realize that allegedly, I'm going to say allegedly because I've had people send this to me and all kinds of stuff, but allegedly his 20-year-old son sexually assaulted a 12-year-old. So would that be, if we're going to use the insight of many people have on Dylan, wouldn't we say, well, that proves why they don't like police, because police got it wrong. They locked up their kids. So everybody that has a story that makes them not innocent, we must prove their innocence. Let's blame the victims. I don't know enough about that. People had just told me about that case, and I'm like, okay, whatever. I personally don't give a shit. If he did that, then he is right where he needs to be. So here's 11/22. And there are the cameras, right? That's what that one's showing. This one's showing a different angle. We were on this for a long time, this 1330 Linda Lane camera, because people swore up and down that. I want to ask you this, since we're watching this photo. Here's 11/22. People focus on the 11/12, right? But look how there's homes behind it, not too terribly far away. So if you would have been screaming bloody murder, bloody agonizing murder at 2:27 in the morning, You don't believe that any of these people would have called the police if they thought that there was really at this home, such as a murder taking place? Tell me what you think, Chad. Do you agree with me or do you disagree with me? If they clearly heard something at 227 that was blood curdling and it was indicative of some crime going on, and here's the house, and this house is directly behind it, and these houses are much further, right? Surely they heard more and saw more than they probably have ever told, but wouldn't these people have called the police if they really would have believed that that would have happened, that that was what was going on? And let me ask you another question. Let me ask you another question. If at 227 there was a blood-curdling scream and there was a murder going on at 11:12, right? Allegedly. I don't believe it, but, many people do. If that would have been occurring, you're telling me all the people that entered and exited that residence and none of them called 911? How come you're not on them for not calling 911, but you consistently stay on Bethany and Dylan for not calling 911? But if, in your theory, they were murdered 11:12 and nobody in that residence called 911? And here's something else that's going to blow your mind a little bit. If the murder did happen at 11:12, what would Dylan be cleaning up? What would Bethany be cleaning up? What would they need to be cleaning up if the murder didn't even happen at 11:22? Answer me that, my dear Watson. If you believe that the murders happened at 11:12, what would they need to be cleaning up? Where are these other alternative suspects in the home if they're being taken out at another residence? And don't you think it would have been easier for Dylan to have said, I didn't hear anything, I didn't see anything, I slept through it all? She didn't have to tell she saw a man dressed all in black. She didn't have to say any of that. But she did. And obviously, when she woke up or when she came to and they called 911, it was enough in her mind to be the first thing that she wanted to tell. But have you ever thought of that? No, people don't think of that. They think, well, they're talking about it happened at 227, so it must have happened at 227, and everybody involved in that was a killer. Okay, well, let's go that route. So if they were killed at 11:12 at 227 with the blood-curdling scream, what was Dylan cleaning up at 227 to, or from 421 to 11:58? What was she cleaning up? What blood was she cleaning up in the house? Why would she have had any cleaning supplies in her room? And you believe that if you clean up a bloody mess, you're going to instantly be able to wash that blood off your hands? Even if you're wearing gloves, you think this killer didn't leave any DNA behind, and they're cleaning up a crime scene with some Rubbermaid gloves. They're not going to get blood all over them somewhere, somehow. They're not going to be in their hair. It's not going to be anywhere. I was looking into this because it was different. It made a lot of inquisitive hairs stand up. Remember this? Said Inside Looking posted his exact poem, only it was a riddle hinting to a garden. And we know who Inside Looking supposedly was. It was titled Garden. Flowers, leaves, and butterflies. Here's a sight to soothe your eyes. A mini forest outside your home. You might even find a gnome. I thought that was quite interesting when I first heard about it. And there it is. And there was coordinates attached to it, which if he was really posting that, he is not a brilliant mind, okay? Maybe he is as slow as people make him to be. Maybe he's not a brilliant criminology PhD student that was so brilliant, but still so autistic that he couldn't do the crime. He was so frail that he barely could walk up his flight of stairs to his house, to his apartment, without needing the assistance of a cane. He walked with a pimp limp. Obviously, he couldn't drive worth of shit, right? He couldn't drive worth of shit. The one thing that I've always thought of, and this is my own inquisitive mind, okay, this is Steptoe right here. You're telling me that if they went and looked back on cameras canvassing his home area, his location, was he ever caught on camera in any of these areas? Lurking, looking around, walking, jogging? Was he ever caught on camera somewhere other than 1122, those 23 times? But then, let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about the 23 times because that's not realistic. There's no way they could have found him 23 times. So he turned his phone off all 23 times. How suspicious might that have been? Quite suspicious, right? Someone wrote all over 4chan like a day or two after the murders, sage, 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 over and over on a post. I don't know what that means. And this is another one that really came out like early on. I thought to myself, does this have any reference to the crime? December 18, 2022. It says, I may have some so far unheard info. While at my wife's work, Christmas party last week, my wife was talking to a coworker's wife who is roughly the same age as these girls and from Moscow. We're from and live in Spokane, but lots of her coworkers are from the Moscow area. Anyway, this coworker's wife brings up that she knows the victims and survivors, and the rumor circulating the friend group is that one of the girls went upstairs that night and made eye contact with a stranger on the second floor. Dude was just standing there motionless, staring back at her. Creeped her out so much that she just turned and went back to her room and locked the door. Not sure why she would keep this from police, or if she didn't, why they would keep this info from the public, as they should have a description. Unfortunately, my wife relayed this to me on the ride home, where I would have been able to pry even more. I don't know what y'all think. Do y'all think that any of this stuff happened? Your buddy with a buddy here. You can expect redacted 911 call and redacted body cam footage of Dylan and Bethany Wednesday. This is the same ring audio I heard, except cleaned up a little. The owner of the ring cam must have released it against PD wishes. Maddie was killed first, followed by Kaylee. Xana said to Ethan, "There's someone here." Ethan heads up the stairs to investigate. Sees Brian mangling the girls upstairs. "Brian, come look." Ethan, "Fuck you." Brian, "Fuck you, I'm gonna kill you." Ethan runs to the kitchen to escape or grab a weapon. Still unclear, but there is some disturbance near the kitchen. Knives, including the knocked over plant and a broken fume vape cartridge. See how all this feeds speculation? Brian goes directly into Xana's room from upstairs. That is Ethan shouting Xana. Xana apparently stays still until Ethan returns to the room and is immediately overpowered by Brian, neck wound. Brian tells Xana, "It's okay, I'm here to help," and kills her. Once he's no longer in danger, he mutilated Ethan and walked out right by Dylan, believed due to exhaustion and the length of time he had already been in the house after the first disturbance. Isn't it crazy how all this stuff is still being circulated 4 years later? Hell, if anybody's watching tonight, you're probably going to start rehearing all this information once again. You know, I guess not talking about this isn't going to make it go away. I had never heard of that, Jeff. I'd never heard of that the police knocked over that plant. But I believe that you had said that before. I think because your friend, the photographer or whatever, had said such or whatever. But let me go back to the 227 loud scream, and I'm going to say this again because this is what people want you to hear. They want you to hear that there was a massive scream at 227, a blood-curdling scream, that this is when the crime was taking place. So at 227, based on the documents, wasn't there fixing to be text messages to Jack from Kaylee and Maddie all the way to 258? So if this was at 227, A, how did those text messages get from their phones to that person's phone? And B, if they were supposedly killed at that residence, oh, they were dragged back to 11/22/12. Okay. So you dragged people from your residence with a fucking ring cam out in the front recording everything? Because there was no back door of that 11/12. So if you're telling me they were killed there at 11/12, every one of those people at that party that was identified would have been culpable for murder after the fact. But you never hear it go that in depth. It's always whatever it is that you're trying to push. This is where the murder happened. Can you hear it? Okay, so 417, the thud and then the dog barking. What was that? So you're telling me that if they were disposed of, killed at other residents, they're brought back to 1122 and they were placed and posed, what would be the purpose of needing a cleanup? What would be the purpose of a cleanup? Supposedly there's not a lot of blood, so what would be the purpose of a freaking cleanup? If the crime didn't even happen where you think it happened, what would be the purpose of a cleanup? See how all those inconsistencies work? But people don't want to say it like that because they want you to imagine that their imaginary mental capacity can actually make this all make sense based on their emotional variance after they recall something. Did you hear that? 227, someone screaming. That is not a party scream. That is someone screaming their guts out. But yet, those same people that we believe were murdered in that house somehow were moved to the other house. And somehow or another, somebody was on their phone at 412. There was text messages going out from two women's cell phones. But yet these people were already deceased and posed. Bro, that's a lot of work right there. That's a lot of work. 412. A sign of life. 417. End of life. Tragically, by a coward. A frail, autistic coward. And you know why it doesn't make sense to a lot of people on all these social media platforms? Because they emphasize with the killer. They're shady just like the killer. They put themselves in the killer's quote unquote mindset. You ever notice that some of these people are frail? Some of these people are autistic on the spectrum. Hell, they'll tell you such. I wouldn't have used that. I would have used this. Oh, so you have the capacity to be a killer? Well, I didn't say that, but oh, yes, you did. Yes, you did. You don't have to think like one in order to catch one. And that's what people want you to believe. You know? You don't. You don't have to think one like one to catch one. It's kind of like you give credence to one being stronger than the other, even though you don't know them. Just because we heard Kaylee was, taught by her dad about firearms and all this stuff, well, she didn't have a firearm that night. Have we ever heard that any of the four that were viciously murdered had taken self-defense courses? No, but there's so many people that want to interject the dramatization of, well, this person would have done this person would have done that. How do we know Ethan at 6'4" would have been able to take out Brian? It's an assumption because he's 6'4" and that he was kind of athletic built. but Brian had a knife. So it kind of, had it been hand to hand and Ethan would have been wide awake, then you might have had the upper hand. Him and Xana could have whooped his ass. They could have. But not most people are going to lose that battle when somebody had the element of surprise and you've been partying and you're not coherent. Hell, for the sake of argument, let's say from 2 to 4 in the morning, your brain is shutting down. If you work nights or anything like that, from 3 to 5, your brain, that is the hardest time to stay awake. 3 to 5 in the morning. I don't care how much coffee you drink. I don't care any of that. You sit still long enough, you're going to start almost hallucinating. It's going to make you feel like you're hallucinating because your body is wanting to sleep. So if you're in any kind of sleeping variation during those hours, you jump out of bed and you hear something, you're instantly going to understand what's going on. She heard whimpering. People are saying she didn't hear anything. Okay, she did hear whimpering. She said she heard whimpering. Coming out of the bathroom, she was unclear as to where all these noises and all these statements were coming from. That is the inconsistency. She was not clear for a reason. Not because she was an advocate to the crime. You want to place her as an advocate because you want somebody to blame to make your little whatever it is so that you can sleep at night by vindicating somebody else because your situation is so asinine that it's the only way that it makes sense to you. And that's anybody who talks on this case that it's just blowing smoke out their ass. And I know a lot of people can see right through that, but they don't want to call it what it is. Because if they call it what it is, then that means that they're upsetting a lot of their quote unquote friends in the chat. So therefore, can't have that because then I can't type GTSY with hearts and how you been and this and that and the other. I don't believe it's a love for Brian. I don't believe it's a fascination. It might be for some deranged people, but for the most part, I believe it just gives people daytime TV that is no longer around. Jerry Springer died. Maury's no longer around. Steve Wilkos. All those people, they're no longer around. So daytime TV has shifted to YouTube. And how did those shows survive so many seasons? Because they created the illusion that couldn't be explained. That is a psychological thing. If you make people believe that this is unsolvable, they're going to believe it, even if they're going against their own intuition. Because there's a lot of people in those chats that question whether Brian really could have done it. And I've heard people say it. I don't say that he couldn't have done it. I just don't understand how he did it. And then people say, well, he had to be a ninja in order to do this or that and the other. No, he was autistic, he was frail, and he had a knife. Therefore, that made him incapable of being a murderer. Okay, let me challenge your theory here. There was a quadriplegic man who murdered a person in his vehicle with a gun. No fingers, no toes. Bam, killed him dead. Threw him out. Your logic sucks. It really does. I hate to say it like that, but a lot of people's logic sucks when they try to defend these movie type things. Go back to Forensic Files, ID Channel, whatever it is they used to watch, because that gives you a lot more insight than YouTube TV. It really does. I mean, it's laughable at this point. It's laughable. It really is. Do you think Ann Taylor had the foresight to advise Brian to say absolutely nothing so that whack jobs on the internet would, in its essence, speak for him if they identify him? No, I don't. I believe that people, if you were going to give people that much credit, people have their own intent and they have their own motives. They really do. Every day that they come on here and they speak about this with their questions and unanswered variations, and this is an angle we never thought of, and blah, blah, blah. All that stuff. There's an intent and there's a motive. I believe, based on what I know about defense attorneys, their whole job is to defend their client and cause reasonable doubt. If you're going to put it like that, then there must have been some emotional attachment on her behalf. You got to remember, she wasn't the only attorney on that team. There was Mathoff, and then there was Bicca Barlow, right? So you're telling me, once again, if we're going to look at that aspect as people look at the police, you're telling me that Ann ran the show while the other two sat back and watched herself destruct? I don't think so. I don't believe that's how it went down at all. I believe that all the people on that team, from A to Z, had a conjunctive meeting and laid it out in front of him. And he may have already known. He could have been running the show all along. We don't know that. We don't know that he was wanting the motions that he wanted to be taken out because he believed that if these things were taken out, then that wouldn't make him appear culpable of being able to do this crime. So, want to know how he did it? Beginner's luck. Well, to be honest, it doesn't take a skilled person to kill anybody. It really doesn't. It doesn't take a ninja to kill somebody. You're walking in, you're breaking in somewhere, the slider's broken, you walk in, you see it dimly lit, right? You have some kind of variation who lived upstairs, who lived wherever else. You don't think that he walked around a little bit before he did what he did? Who the hell knows? Dylan knows. You're right. It doesn't take an electrician. There's no way that somebody could have stabbed somebody and done the damage that they did without making a gory mess. Only in Scream movies, okay? Only in Hollywood does that happen. State of science fiction. Only certain viewers believe that that's capable of happening. Because most people, when this case first broke, there was some logical questions being asked in a lot of these chats. There really was. They were looking for a person of interest. And how many times do I got to tell you guys that the police don't look to make a suspect? They look to eliminate potential suspects. So all those interviews that you saw, those individuals, Dylan, Bethany, Hunter, Emily, all those people, those interviews were looking to eliminate them as suspects, not make them suspects. So if you're going to eliminate somebody as a suspect, you're not going to be asking the hard questions. You're not going to be asking them the questions that at that point you didn't even freaking know. Because you have to remember, they didn't have a clue early on as what they were really looking for. All they knew is 4 people were murdered, and that's it. One of the surviving roommates told them what she saw. That's all you know. So you're telling me you're going to interrogate and ask the hard questions when all you're doing is not even understanding what the hell just went down? You get what I'm saying? Do you get what I'm saying? But people want you to believe that they should have been pressed harder. You could tell they were lying by their answers, their pauses, their inconsistency. Okay, have you ever been interviewed by the police? If you have, you understand you're not always going to be thinking the clearest because you're trying to believe, okay, do they know anything about what I've done or haven't done in the past? Am I somehow going to self-incriminate myself and make this worse for myself instead of getting out of here, what I really want to do? Demented. He looks very, very delicious to you. Okay. Maybe you should write him. Maybe you should get the inside scoop, the 411. The first question I would have you ask him would be, Brian, what made you do it? Don't ask why. Ask what made him do it. Because when you ask it like that, if he indeed did do this, it would piss him off. Because automatically you came out gunning for the truth. You have. He will never talk to you. Oh, that's interesting. I remember very well who I'm speaking to. I really know. I know who you're talking to. Who I'm talking to. So, 227. This is what people want you to believe. This is the big evidence. A scream. A blood-curdling scream that didn't sound like party sounds. Sounded like people being murdered. Then connect the dots from 227 to 421. Because whether you want to believe that was the same car going around that residence 5 times, there was a vehicle. You can't deny that. That was not a scooter. That was not a skateboard with lights. None of that. That was a whitish looking vehicle with headlights and brake lights, correct? So if you're gonna say that from 227 to 417, all that went down, if you're really looking into the mindset of a killer, if you're going to randomly kill somebody and you've never killed anybody in your life, never, but you're supposedly going to kill somebody because you had a crush on them. So now you're saying Dylan was at that 1112 house participating in that? Some people have some very, very vivid imaginations. I've heard that recently from other people. I think it was this lady on TikTok. What's her name? Natasha or something? She was talking one day about how Dylan had a crush on Kaylee. And I know exactly where that came from. That came from Sarge. Sarge said that a long time ago, how he believed that it was a lover's quarrel because Dylan was probably in love with Kaylee and she couldn't have her, and therefore she killed her. The way he described it, anything's possible. But if you really think about that theory, how did one, if you're going to be mad at one, that angry to be mad at one, what would it take for you to have to kill the other three? And if you were going to kill the other three, it would have been simpler for you to leave the house and claim you were never home during that time, right? People are implicating these people because they're saying that there's no way they participated, or they could have participated. They're hiding the real killers. Well, if there was a real killer that wasn't in custody, don't you believe that there would have been more murders 4 years later? You don't think there would have been any more break-ins and potential sexual assaults or anything of that sort that we would have heard about? Because people would have been on fire for that information. The moment we heard of another break-in in Idaho, especially Pullman or Moscow, or how it could have been, what's that town, Frankston? Any of that information, boy, people would have been on fire, because that would have given credence to the theory that Brian didn't do it, that there was still a person out there. But not one, not a copycat, not anything has been released. And I'm sure people have been digging nonstop trying to find something. And not one thing has been emerged that even echoes this type of crime. Not one. People don't want to hear that, though. Because if it wasn't him, don't you think the killer would want to be killing again? Because as far as we know about individuals that are killers or have that mentality, they cool off for a little bit, then they strike again. And then they cool off again. Then they strike again. They just don't go for the fence the first time and say, okay, I'm done. I killed 4 people. So therefore, we're good. I got it out of my system. Doesn't happen that way. You know it. I know it. We all know it. But these are just some things that I've heard nonstop. And people can't connect the dots for you. They won't. They'll just give you that. Well, at 4:22, there was a dog barking. And it barked for 30 seconds, then it stopped, then it barked again, then it said, woof, 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 woof. I think that means the killer is near. But I don't know. This is strictly speculation. And please don't sue me, because my channel's for entertainment purposes only. That's the kind of shit you hear every day. But you're so comfortable throwing people out there that are traumatized by this situation. Some of these people claim to be professionals in their past life, which is a miscarriage of representation to their profession. I would hate to be known associated with some of these creators, knowing that they were a lawyer, a doctor, law enforcement, first responders, whatever. And they're on these platforms talking as if their knowledge of certain things was greater than what it really was. You know, like Ann Taylor said about, what's his name, Turvey? She said he's out there speaking on things he really shouldn't be speaking on because that's beyond his expertise. That means that he's just talking shit. He should stay in his lane. Stick to what he does instead of what he wants to do. And that's what people should do. Stay in their lane. Stay in their lane. But we hear these disclaimers. Well, we need to ask questions. Everything needs to be questioned. Why don't you question your own household first? Why don't you question your own reality? Why don't you question how come there's certain situations in your life that don't add up? You tell us one thing on this day, and then you double back and totally go against what you said the first time, and then skate backwards on another day. Why don't you learn how to be more consistent with your stuff? See, it doesn't take any intellect to go against the status quo. It doesn't take any intellect. I could go against every crime that's being presented right now and be in favor of the killer. And I could show you ways in which the investigation was flawed, the attorneys were prejudiced, this person, that person, blah, 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 all the stuff that's been fabricated about this case from day one. See, people saw that people were making a lot of money on this case very early on, and they jumped on it because they thought that this was going to be the case that got them to keep their lights on or whatever the hell they needed it for. Because I heard this other person talking about how his car was broke and how he got money from YouTube to keep his car running. Hey, I don't blame your hustle, bro. I'm not hating on your hustle. But don't lie about it. If you say you're doing this shit for money to keep whatever it is that you need kept in your lifestyle going, well, at least say that. That way when you talk about certain shit, people know that you're full of shit. You know what I mean? But then that would kill your reality. That would kill your show. And once again, I'm talking about multitudes of creators, not just one. But then that takes the entertainment value out of YouTube. Then all of a sudden, we're just going to be hearing about Brittany J and all her discrepancies. Because that's the hottest thing on YouTube. If we get rid of Idaho, then all we got left is Brittany J and that crowd. So I don't know what's worse. But it's not my job to understand it. But I can call it how I see it. You might not like it. You might not respect it. But as I've told you before, I've worked with criminal-minded people for decades. I can spot a criminal-minded person not by what they look like, but the inconsistencies of what they say, because I am a therapist and I'm trained to listen to people. I'm trained to pick out indiscrepancies and patterns in which they talk. And a lot of these people that are talking to you and passing judgment on these people and those people, they don't ever listen to what they say. They want to sound so brilliant and go against anybody that goes against them. That in itself should tell you that there's something wrong with their belief system. Big. Oh, the chat's cracking me up tonight. And that foodie woman. Yeah, I mean, there's other things to watch that are really like women just pecking at each other, you know? Brittany Jade, the big topic, though. I don't even know that woman, so I don't even know all that goes on, but I know that I've been curious and I've clicked on those and I'm like, Jesus, why are they talking about this woman's recent birth? I mean, why are they talking about her privates? Why are they talking about this and that? It's relentless. That's why I don't claim to be true crime, because I don't want to be associated with any of that. What you hear is what you get, whether it's in real life, on the street, at my job, on the phone, face to face. You'll hear the same thing. I don't get on here to create a false image of who I am. I don't have anything to gain from that. And if you haven't figured that out yet, I'm always going to say what I want to say. And I'll keep saying it, whether you like it or not. Anybody who dislikes me or dislikes the channel, I'll always be honest. And I always stand up for education, knowledge, and professionals. I know what a criminal looks like. I know what a criminal sounds like. I know what a con man's game is. I've dealt with drug addicts and alcoholics for 27 years. Well, on 27 years. The game doesn't change, just the faces. And I can tell you, there's plenty of people on these platforms that they are just that, criminal. A criminal-minded person, because they believe that it's them versus the world, and they've been wrong somehow. So therefore, how would they ever believe that a killer walked in, killed 4 people, if they believe that they've been wronged by the same people who are investigating that crime? It's their job to stand up for the underdog, right? Or is it? Or is it? You might not like anything about me, but I can tell you one thing that you can respect is my honesty. People don't like it because it's too blunt and too honest. But I don't know any other way to be. I've asked people to be on my panel, not because I want to grift off of them. I enjoy getting to know people. And I have some good people that grace my channel. And I appreciate that. Yeah, if you want to hit the like button, hit the like button. If not, don't worry about it. If you're watching this on your TV, I don't know how you can hit the like button. I don't know how you can subscribe. You're shitting me. I didn't hear that. Some creators think it's okay to body shame Christy Gonzalez after all she's been through. But yet, whoever these creators are, do they ever show themselves on camera? Do they ever show full body shots of them? Because a lot of these creators only show you so much, or they're never on camera. But they're the ones behind the camera making fun of people. It's like you might have a crooked tooth, but they don't have a tooth to be making fun of your crooked tooth. You know what I mean? It's like, come on, man. I've never seen Brittany J. I mean, but I see her face all over the place. I know that she had a different picture before, Now she has one of her in glasses or whatever. Supposedly she just had a baby. But people go after her relentlessly, man. Bullhorn Betty, all those people. I mean, think of all the people that followed JLR, Arctic Fox, all those people that thought these people were outstanding citizens. And think about some of the people that get started on the YouTube streets, where they're broken out at. Where do they break out at? What channel? You got to ask yourself, what channel do they break out from? There's a lot of correlation between all these views, all these declarations of innocence, all this stuff. It all leads back to one particular area. And if you dig far enough back into this Idaho 4 case, you'll know where it all started. How there was a creator that was claiming to be a drug lord talking to a boots on the ground guy who wasn't any of that. And people loved it. People loved it because it gave them mystique. It gave them a sense of, we found something different than anybody's telling us. Have you ever seen any of these creators get off their platforms and go and actually interview somebody in real life? Like a police officer or a forensic scientist or anything like that? Why is that? Because if you're really looking for justice, wouldn't you want to go above and beyond to learn what it is that you're trying to find justice for? Or is that just a rallying cry to get people into your place? Hey, we're looking for justice over here. Come on over here. We're looking for justice. We're looking for justice for all the unjustified, justified, victimized people out there. We're looking for justice. Come on in. Leave $5 at the door because I work hard. And this internet's not cheap. StreamYard's not cheap. None of it's cheap. I work hard for you. How's that looking for justice? How's that looking for justice? Those 4 people that you supposedly are looking for justice for, they loved Dylan and Bethany. They loved those 2. So the fact that you're saying you're looking for justice for 4, but you hate the other 2 because division sells tickets. You know, the sad part is, just like Olivia said, the sad part is most of these creators, if any of those 4 that were still alive, wouldn't have anything to do with any of y'all. Any of y'all. And that's what pisses you off more, because you are nobody and you know it. And the fact that you have a show gives you a sense of belonging. Who does that sound like? Oh, Brian. That sounds like Brian. So how could you not emphasize with somebody who's viewed as a nobody? Because you know you're nobody. And the only way that you're somebody is by people telling you you're somebody on the internet. I got it. But I've ran over what I wanted to say about this case. I guess I've needed to say a lot of this stuff because, like I said, I'm all over the place. I'm looking on TikTok. TikTok will piss you off. I'm going to tell you, it will piss you off because people are so vile. You think YouTube's vile? TikTok will piss you off, bro. And I watch too much TikTok, I guess, today, and I had to get a lot of this out. But you see one, you see it all, right? You see one, you see it all. If you got pissed off at anything that I said, ask yourself this question. What made you so angry? What made you so angry? Because if it doesn't fit, you shouldn't wear it. If people screenshot this and send it to you and say, oh, 12 gauge, we're talking about your son. Well, guess what? I've been sent booking photos and not only about this person's son, but about them. I get sent stuff all the time. It's interesting to me, some of the stuff that I see that people dig up on people. I don't believe in doxing people or even making fun of them. Because honestly, if I was to roast somebody, I wouldn't stop at just a couple words. I wouldn't stop at any of that or make idle threats. I would just go all out. And if you don't believe that, then you don't know me very well. But I can tell you this, it's not worth my time or the energy to do that. Because as I said yesterday, adults handle adversity different than children do. Children make fun of, they make threats, they blame people, they do all kinds of stuff to deflect the reality that somebody's trying to show them. It's like you don't believe you're overweight, but somebody keeps telling you, hey, your blood pressure's high, you eat too much sugar, your sugar's high, your cholesterol's high, and you look in the mirror and you're trying to say, well, the doctor's out to get me. She just wants my money. I'm really not overweight, but I never get out of bed. I never get out of the chair. I never do this or that and the other. How can you claim that that's a conspiracy against you if there's tests that have been ran to show you that you are indeed overweight and that you're going to die soon if you don't change your ways? You know what I mean? But that's the kind of stuff that we have on these social platforms where there's so much denial that it's everybody else's fault for somebody's existence to not equal somebody else's. Life is hard. Nowhere did anybody say because the Gonsalves or Chapins or whoever has money, it makes it right for you to go after them because you do not. Doesn't make them drug runners because they have money. Doesn't automatically mean that you're doing something illegal because you have money. The fact that you have to beg for money should tell everybody who sends you money everything about you. That you're incapable as an adult to take care of your business. That's what it should tell people. And no matter how angry or how irrelevant that you try to minimize your stuff, that's basically what you tell people is I'm an adult and I can't run my own household because I need help. There's no way in hell I would ever get on here and say I could not run my household, that I need your help because this is off, that's off, especially when I don't do anything to make it better. But I try to tear down everybody else's life that I talk about. Yeah, I remember that, Jeff. And how quickly did they turn? They turned really fast, did they not? This has not been an investigative podcast tonight. This has just been a Sunday night. And oh. Nothing more, nothing less. I really wish he would write you too. That would be awesome. That would be awesome. If he ever does, I hope you let us know because I'm curious as to how he's going to respond to you. Try not to tell him you want to eat him. Maybe that's a little too forward. Start with, hey, I think you're cute. That limp you got, you still use a cane. Are you able to enunciate words because of your autism? Isn't it funny how people, in their attempt to dequalify somebody for potentially being a killer, they make him such a perspective that is unbelievable, especially with all the accolades that Brian has overcame in his short life. He overcame addiction. He overcame the capability to not be educated. He did go through college. He did get an education multiple times over. He was a PhD student. Nothing negates any of that, but he became a murderer for whatever reason. You know what I mean? I don't fixate on the positives when somebody viciously kills 4 people. All those positives don't mean shit. It's the end result that defines you from here on out. And I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you so much for joining my channel tonight. If you enjoyed any part of it or that you want me to know that you were here, leave a comment or hit the like button. Neither is expected, but always appreciated, right? Do you think the shaving his eyebrows down with his K-bar was on the thing to do list, but he forgot? I don't know. I don't think he really thought that far in advance. Brian indeed was the killer, will always be the killer, and no petition on this planet, or illusion or delusion, will ever change that. Because if the court of law deemed it so, that is the best we have. And no one's on here to change anybody's mind. But be real about it. Stop with the fuckery. You know what I mean? Especially when you come after people. I saw somebody coming after Viviana the other day, calling her a liar and all this. Isn't it funny how people call other people liars, but they can't take some constructive criticism thrown their way? They come at you with full force, anger, and contempt. Once again, my friend, that is a coping skill of an individual that has been called out. So when you notice that happens on these platforms, that should tell you this person, as you say, has been triggered. That is all I have for tonight. And hopefully I won't be talking about this shit the next time I'm on. If I am, just tell me to stop and move around. Because it's old, it's tired, and it's been played out. And indeed, if you feel that I was talking about you, my email address is on my channel. If I pissed you off because I was talking about a deceased person that lied about this case, send me an email. We'll talk about it. Just don't threaten me. Because you're nothing more than a voice on a platform of irrelevance. See how that fits. Until next time, my friends, this is 12 Gauge. And this is my channel, 12 Gauge Investigative. Maestro, cue that music.